It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me. Craig, shut up.
Hey, I need you guys to do these things.
You're like a beautiful mind. I'm more like Forrest Gump.
So, welcome to Reality Check with Craig Price. This week, Cindy Maher comes on the show and is the first guest I've had that is here to talk about a subject that I also present on, multi-generations in the workplace. For those of you who don't know, one of the presentations that I give is the X's and O's of the new workforce. And depending on who the audience is, the presentation is usually geared, most often geared, towards older managers, Gen X, baby boomers, and explains what has led to the ideas, the values, the attitudes of younger employees entering the workforce. It's basically a history lesson with some management tips. Cindy's here, and what she does, along with her business partner, Carol Grannis, who couldn't come on the podcast today, she's here to talk about a program that they're doing, Engaging Multi-Generations in the Workplace. And she and Carol will be presenting on June 25th at the International Public Management Association HR Eastern Region Conference. That's going to be in Hyannis. It's going to be in Cape Cod in late June. Why wouldn't you go? They're kicking off the conference, and I will be shutting it down with, I'll be closing it with a bang. How's that? Does that sound better than what I said before? Because this marketing stuff is, I'm not very good at. Well, get back on track. I rarely talk to people who have the same subject matter as I do, so it's, my main topic, negativity, is poison to most speakers. They don't want to talk about it, and if they do, they're bad-mouthing it. They're being negative to negativity, which is ironic. But this is the one time where I can safely say this is one of the few interviews where I actually know something before talking to the person, which is kind of a treat for me. I'm tired of feeling stupid most of the interviews. So this is one of the few times I actually know what I'm talking about with someone who knows what they're talking about. So without further ado, let me give you Cindy Maher. When we talk about generations, the first thing we talk about is younger workers. So I want you to defend this statement. They're all snot-nosed punks. Go.
Snot-nosed punks. I like that, although that's not the label we use in our teaching. The fact is that when we talk about the younger generation, Generation Y, who, was born, the term I use, they were born after 1978, although other people use lots of different decades to describe this group. But the fact is they are young, but what people don't realize is that they are probably the most socially conscious group that's come across since the baby boomers. And I think that when we look at these kids who are on Facebook, constantly texting, sharing their lives with the world, we don't see that the combination of being socially conscious and being connected with the world has made them an extremely interesting and unique group.
Well, that's the polite way of saying it. Extremely interesting. Because I find that people are having such an issue because I understand that there's difference in generations and I think that's more perceived than actual. I think a lot of people think there's a difference when they find out that they're actually doing the same thing. Like a 55-year-old salesman is actually texting during a meeting, but if he sees a 22-year-old do it, they're being disrespectful.
Absolutely.
And so I find that people are really just kind of blocking out their own issues that they're doing, and they're just kind of projecting it onto younger folks. And I think they've done that historically throughout time.
Oh, absolutely. When we teach this stuff, we usually start with sharing like 10 different statements that have been spoken by different generations, and then we ask our audiences to tell us what generation said this thing, and it turns out that they're typically wrong. That they think, I never would have said this. It must have been the younger generation. And really, we are more similar than we are different.
And I'm here with Cindy Maher, who is part of Cindy Maher and Carol Grannis, who's unfortunately not be able to join us, but they are presenting at the IPMA-HR
Eastern Region, IPMA-HR Eastern Region Conference on June 25th. So you're opening the show on that 25th, and I'm closing it 2 days later. So unfortunately, I don't know if our paths are going to cross.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But that's all right. Believe me, it's kind of underwhelming me actually meeting me versus talking to me. So, but you're going to be talking about engaging multi-generations in the workplace, and I find that's a really hot topic because it's really more focused on the younger workers, though there are different aspects of each generation. I think because the baby boomers have been in office, so to speak, for so long, I think most people know how to deal with them. I think the Generation X, we've been, that's my bracket. We've been in the workplace for 20 plus years now.
Right.
So we so people are starting to get a handle on us, I would hope. But I noticed that there really seems to be a huge gap as far as engaging. Because as far as I could tell, it used to be easier to engage folks. What was the best way to engage baby boomers in your experience?
The best way to engage baby boomers is, I think, seriously, very similar to the best way to engage people of all generations, which is to value them, to give them feedback, to challenge them with new projects, to ask for their experiences and perspectives, and to really listen to what they have to say. And that's kind of the point when we talk about each one of these 4 generations, is that they really all need the same thing, even though they come from some very different types of growing up experiences, and even though their experience is colored through what happened in the world while they were growing up. For instance, the boomers came across during a really crazy time in the world where they wanted a very different, better, more open and just world. They were going through and finishing up a terrible war. And when the baby boomers came into play, they wanted to do what their parents did, which was pay their dues and move up the ladder, and work became their identity. And that was great until, the downsizing happened in the early 90s. And the same thing is happening for each of these generations. They come in and they get shocked because our economy has been in flux, has moved up and has gone down throughout their careers. So that's really colored the way people feel about their jobs, by the risks they want to take. But at the end of the day, when we talk about managing these people, they want to be listened to, they want to be heard, they want to be respected, and they want some challenging they want challenging work that has purpose.
Now, the approach for each generation may change. From my experience, it may change because I feel like X's, the Generation X, which is like 1962 to 1978, somewhere around there. So basically late 60s, or if you were born in the late 60s, early 70s. Right. I feel they're much more independent. And I don't mean that other generations can't be independent, but I feel that they were, since they were kind of raised in an era of high divorce, latchkey kids coming home to empty houses, they just grew up, kind of taking care of themselves, and that's kind of progressed into the workplace. So, well,
that's very, very true, and the fact that they've had this independence is kind of funny, because these are the people raising this new generation who, if you think about it, they're raising them with the idea of umbrella. If you've heard helicopter parenting, which is they're like all over their kids, and yet they themselves were raised by boomers who were really putting in long hours in the workplace, and for the first time, both mothers and fathers were in the workplace. So you're right. They were latchkey kids growing up in a really scary world. They didn't believe in job security, and they became really independent. But think about, again, from a management perspective, they want to be listened to. They want challenging work. They want to have purpose, and so the idea of what people need from a management perspective is very much the same. Well, we teach in a funny way we teach using theater. And so we get an opportunity to demonstrate each one of these generations through a quick scene at an interview. And it's very, very funny, but it really kind of gets it just raises people's awareness around why people are the way they are, what in history caused them to be that way, and what they need in the workplace. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think people don't realize the fact, especially Generation X, that they're overcompensating for the lack of parents when they were growing up. So now that's why they are helicopter parents. It's like, my parents never got to really see me play baseball very much. They worked. So if the game wasn't on a weekend,
right?
They weren't coming. That's a matter of fact. So now, because they grew up and said, well, I want to make sure that my parents, if I'm going to have a kid, I'm going to show up to every soccer match. I'm going to volunteer as a coach. It's almost like they're overcompensating. The pendulum has swung so far to one side. Do you see that as a situation where they're kind of overcompensating for what they had in their life?
Well, absolutely, and as a result, this is the Generation Yers have been raised on a really healthy dose of self-esteem, right? So these are kids whose parents revered them, who turned down high-paying positions sometimes to stay at home with them, and these are the kids who everyone on the team gets the most valuable player award, and every kid in the grade gets some kind of award at the end of the year. So when they come into the workplace, they get a little shell-shocked when they're not getting awards and constant promotions and the high salaries that they're looking for. Yeah,
I mean, when we lost, all we got was ice cream. I mean, we lost the championship, and we got ice cream. We didn't get a ribbons and trophies or anything. It was just like, oh, hey, you lost. Suck it up. We'll see you next year. So how has that started to affect management, where if they're constantly feeling like, because they do have self-esteem, but they don't have anything really to back it up. I mean, usually self-esteem is created through experience, through creating positive outcomes. So it's like, hey, I did this, I've achieved something, now I feel confident in that, so now my self-esteem rises, where they're just told, here's some self-esteem, now try to go do some things.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know. The thing is, I try to think back, and I don't know about, Craig, I think we're around the same age, but when I think back to my first decade in the workplace, when I first got out of college or graduate school, I kind of wanted some of those same things. Now, I didn't get an award on the team, or I didn't get all those awards that my children are getting, but I still thought I was pretty hot. And I wanted to be recognized for that, and I wanted my management to realize how good I was and to offer me some challenging work experiences. So it's funny, right? We tend to look at each one of these generations with a big broad brush, but again, aren't we a lot the same as aren't they quite? They're quite a bit the same as we were.
Oh, sure, and it's not just. It's not just age bracket. I've discovered that it depends on where they were, what part of the country they grew up in. Were they a city kid or were they a country kid?
Sure.
Because I find if they grew up in the country, a little away from quote unquote civilization, they're gonna be more like the older generation. It's kind of, if they were in the middle of Manhattan, they're going to be cutting edge as far as culture. For
sure.
Well, I feel it is definitely as an individual. You have to judge each individual as they come in, but as far as a generation of folks, I mean, there does seem to be some kind of cultural divide. Don't you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the more I've been studying and looking and talking to this youngest group in the workplace, the more I find them intriguing, because because there has not been the job market that perhaps we enjoyed when we first got out of school. I mean, you look at the statistics, and it's not a great thing to be a recent college graduate nowadays.
Oh, no.
So as a result, instead of just moving back home and watching TV, a lot of them have gone on some pretty cool adventures that have involved kind of changing the world and helping the poor and going into programs and fields of study that are around making the globe a better place to live, not just the United States, but these. I think they're going out in the world way more than we used to, and going into nonprofits more than perhaps many of us did first coming out of school. And it's tough because they are coming out with the most college debt, way more than we ever had. So I think that there's a lot to be said about this youngest group. I think they're pretty cool.
Oh, hey, there's definitely pros and cons to everyone. And one of the newer situations that I find that the people are running into is that they will be 55, 65-year-old veterans who suddenly now have 32, 33-year-old managers. That dynamic, how can, now, if you were a young manager who's all of a sudden thrust into a group of older veterans, that can be not only intimidating, but it can be hard to get credibility in front of this group. So is there some kind of something you could offer for a younger person who's now all of a sudden in charge?
Well, what we always say is first thing is first, and the first thing to do, whether you are older or younger than your employee group, is to build trusting relationships, to really get to know them, to really get on in a relationship where they're learning from you, but you're also learning from them. And I think that when you are working with boomers and mature generation people who have been in the workforce for decades, there is a lot to be learned from them. And I think that it's important to not only learn about them from a work perspective, but that you build a relationship where you're learning about them from a whole person relationship, right? What's most important to them in their lives? What's their passions outside of work? What's their family like? Where do they live? What are they struggling with? What do they want? And so whether your employees are younger or older, I think that that the very best managers build a relationship where they are really open and transparent and learning about each other and curious and caring. Those are the best managers I ever had.
And I think the younger generation is more equipped to do that because they do want to have more connection. They do want to know they want to be friends with everybody, which is great. I mean, that's not a criticism at all. Not only do they want to be managers, but they want to be able to go out and have a beer with Joe, who's 65 years old, who's been here forever, and that may be something that the older generation may not be used to in the workplace so much.
That could be. I don't know. What's your experience, Craig? I mean, when we say that the youngest generation wants to be friends, is that so different, I think, than Generation Xers? I just wonder what is it so different?
Well, I think for me personally, I think the idea of authority and structure was more prevalent with older generations. I mean, you've got kids that call their parents by their first name. They are allowed to help in the decisions on vacation. Like, where do you want to go on vacation? I remember I was told where we were going.
That's true.
And so I think when they get into the workplace, they don't see Mr. Smith, who is the CEO. They see Dave, who is a coworker and a colleague. And so they do. I feel that they bypass a lot of that structure that we've had in place for so long, which can be very beneficial, but it also, if you're not used to it, can seem disrespectful. I try to tell people that they're not being disrespectful. They're showing people the same amount of respect that they wish to get. It's just so alien to them because they're so used to Mr. Smith is in charge, his boss is so-and-so, and then maybe you call your manager Dave because he's your manager.
Right.
But that structure seems to have gone because the kids have been elevated to that. You said they were being revered. They've been elevated to an equal part of the family instead of the parents are in charge, the kids, do what we tell them to do, and then off we go.
Well, I completely agree. The issue here, though, is that when we talk about the two oldest generations, what we call the matures and the boomers, they are really in the minority now. So for now, Gen X and Gen Y I forget the percentage, but it is over, it's over 70% in the workplace. So when you think about Gen X and Gen Y, who are more working together than the older ones, I would say that we're progressing into, especially for those two, Gen X and Gen Y, we're progressing into a more informal type of world. It's just more informal. There's more dressing down in the workplace. There's more talking to each other from an equal perspective, like you're saying. And when we teach management training and leadership development, we talk a lot about how when two people who are working together, whether one is a manager or not, the best place to come from is from an equal place. Whereas I'm not better than you, I'm not higher than you, I am perhaps your manager, so there's part of my role that's different. But when you're coming from an equal place, you're more likely to listen better, to share ideas better, to get better decisions made, because you're in a real give and take and a real sharing. And so I don't know about you, but that's the kind of workplace I look for. And even when we work with clients from all over the country, the very best relationships that we have with people are where we're at from an equal place. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. But I also feel that the older generation, especially baby boomers, not necessarily the matures as you call them, because the matures, I'm not even sure what percentage that is.
There's just a couple out there, right?
Yeah, there's like nine. There's like 9 of them. There's like 7 guys that are just refuse to quit and retire.
Exactly.
But I think baby boomers, as far as size, I think they equal or are just slightly less than millennials or Generation Y. It's us Xers that are kind of this small chunk in the middle. But I feel that they've been conditioned over time. As you were a company guy, you craved the money, you craved the title. It wasn't necessarily about the work, so to speak. It was, but so their value system is slightly different. You're talking about these young kids coming in to want to save the world, which is great, but I think it's just been conditioned from older groups that it's about you want to make sure that you get more money. Each job you take, it pays more, the title is better, and you get more power. And I don't see that as a long-term good model, which is why it's changing. I think it was really good for that era. But
yes, although when I talk to baby boomers today, they themselves have gone through a lot of flux and a lot of change, and a lot of them have been impacted by layoffs and downsizing. And I remember back in the early 90s, they were calling it re-engineering. But all of that change resulted in a lot of them losing their jobs. So that idea of being a company man, I think even for the boomers, has certainly gone through a lot of change. And a lot of those boomers actually went out and became entrepreneurs, starting their own businesses as a result of that time. So now a lot of them are back. And a lot of them have adult children who are in the workplace. And I think that that they themselves are completely understanding how somebody wouldn't want to stay with a company for sure for more than a few years, and that the whole idea here in how to motivate younger generations is really through learning new skills, developing them. Somebody asked recently, what is the most important skill for any of the generations right now? And the most important skill is acquiring new skills so that you're always marketable and always, ready to make a change.
And I think that's one of the biggest fears that baby boomers are. A lot of them are overcoming it, but I think that's their biggest fear, is that they're at some point they have all this vast knowledge and experience, and then it's rendered useless because the whole system changes. There's new technology. There's a whole new thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's their biggest fear, is becoming obsolete fairly quickly. But I have noticed that they catch on pretty quick. I just think that we've got this notion that old people you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and I don't know if that's true or not. I don't believe that that's very much true. But do you see that as well as that fear of becoming obsolete?
Oh my gosh, I think there's that fear of becoming obsolete even for Gen Xers at this point. People in their now, their 40s. I think the boomers, though, they strike me as such a cool group, not only because, of course, they went through that neat time in the 60s and 70s, but this is a huge population who is totally redefining aging for us and redefining retirement. And many of them, are not doing the retirement our grandparents knew, but rather, or even our parents, but they are, they're kind of reinventing themselves and going into new fields of work and remaining productive. And I think that, I don't know about you. Do you have baby boomers in your life that you know?
Well, yeah, I know. I actually relate more to baby boomers because I just feel old. I was born like a 90-year-old so I can relate, as far as temperament and, kind of a value system. I grew up in a rural area in New England, so I've got that grumpy old man kind of thing going on. But I also was raised with computers and technology, and I enjoy that, so I can adapt fairly quickly on the fly. But yeah, I've seen that some of these things come to pass, so to speak.
Yeah, so I would say that this idea of staying on top of certainly technology and incorporating technology in your life, like how these Gen Yers, these millennials are growing up. They're growing up with a computer in their hands. And it doesn't even, it's like, for them, it's just the way they've learned to be is with technology. Whereas, I don't know about you, but my first job was in a large insurance company, and we still used typewriters when I started. And then they started, incorporating PCs and all that kind of thing. But I did not grow up with a computer. The Atari came later in my teenage lives, and it's just it's rewiring brains and how we learn and how we are. So technology and the economy, I think, have been the real game changers in terms of really transforming who we are in the workplace.
And if you're dealing with we talk about the broad situation where you want to make everybody kind of has the same wants and needs. They want to feel value. They want to feel that they're contributing. Is there one really key piece of information that a manager who's got every single generation, and maybe it's even equally parceled, so it's not like I've got 3 boomers and a whole crew of younger workers, but it could be they're equally spread out. Is there one key piece of advice that you would give them that would really at least to get them on the right foot?
Well, I guess that one thing I would say is that you need to put assumptions aside. Like we said, we paint people with a broad brush, and every individual comes to the table with a unique set of experiences and skills and gifts. So that's one thing. The other thing would be to really get to know each person you're working with, and not that you become friends and you go out drinking after work, but you really build a relationship. You learn about them, you understand what they want in their career, what they want in their lives, and you share the same about yourself. You find out what their values are. For Gen Yers today, like I said, they have a very different value than I had when I first went in the workplace, which is they really want some purpose. They want to help the broader world, and if they can't do that in their data entry job, then it's important to find other ways for your organization to do outreach work, to engage in helping the United Way, so that they feel like they're helping the world, even if they have a job that, it's not like they're working in the Peace Corps. And the last thing I would say is you've got to listen to people. You really have to listen. And when I say listen, I mean you have to be completely present when you're with any one of these generations, because people know when you're not. They know when you're in your head. They know when you're making judgments. They know when you're thinking about other things. And so if there's one management skill that we talk about all the time, it's that. It's to be really present with people.
Well, Cindy, I really appreciate your time today. You and your partner, Carol, can be found where?
We are online on the web at leadingedgecoaches.com. That's our website. And we're really looking forward to IPMA. I wish I could meet you face to face.
Like I said, it sounds much more exciting than it actually is.
What are you speaking about at the IPMA conference?
Well, everybody knows that I'm the negative person, so I talk about negativity and how it's useful.
Nice.
So I there's so much judgment about, and there's so much of this fluff out there about you can do anything, and if everybody could do what they wanted, we would have garbage in the streets. There would be no sewers. Sometimes you have to do jobs you don't like.
For sure.
And working in government, often you're dealing with people that you can't replace. So, but multi-generationals is not the only thing you talk on. You've got a huge catalog of topics. So you'd also specializing in coaching as well.
Yeah, we do a lot with leadership development, performance management, and spend a lot of time with organizations helping them build employee engagement. So that's a lot of the work that we do. I have to say that that this conversation has been work that I enjoyed. So thank you for that. Thanks for having me.
Hey, well, I appreciate you being here. And once again, that's leadingedgecoaches.com. You know what? I hope you open it up. I'm sure you will. You and Carol kick the doors open to IPMA, and I certainly appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, Craig. Nice talking to you.
That's another reality check in the books. I want to thank my guest, Cindy Maher, for joining me. Remember, you can find us on Facebook. You can also find us on Twitter at RealityCheckPod. And you can email me, Craig at SpeakerCraigPrice.com, with any guest suggestions, comments, questions. I'd love to hear from you. I'm going to need some guests for the fall, so don't hesitate to email me, Craig at SpeakerCraigPrice.com. See you next week.